I think you've all heard the story about a poor girl who's oppressed by a wicked stepmother, and with the help of some magical creatures, is able to go to a ball, lose a shoe, and find a prince. Or the young woman who is trapped in a tower with only her hair as the golden stair to let the witch and eventually her lover up and down. But do you know the story about a girl in a tattered cloak who rode a goat and waved a spoon and forged her own destiny? Let me tell you the story of Tatterhood. Once upon a time there was a king and a queen, and they lived in a castle. They had everything they wanted except for children. The queen was out one day and she sees a beautiful child with a haggard old woman. The child comes up to her and says, "I know what you want. If you go to my mother and you get her drunk, she'll tell you what you need." The queen listens to this strange advice and gets the old woman to come with her, and they get drunk, and the woman finally says, "All right, if you want children, here's what you need to do. This is a magical seed. Take a bath. Put the seed under your bed and pour your bath water on top of it. Go to bed. Go to bed, sleep, and in the morning when you wake up, there's going to be a flower with two blossoms. One is beautiful, one is ugly. If you eat the beautiful blossom, you will get what you want." Queen does what she says. Bada bing, bada boom. There's a flower in the morning. She eats the beautiful blossom. It goes down, tastes pretty good, and she says, "You know what? I'll eat the other one just to be safe." Winds up with pregnant, but not with one baby, but two. First baby's born. Riding a goat, wearing a tattered coat, waving a spoon. Everybody screams. The mom's about to faint. And she says, "Mom, don't worry. Don't worry. The next baby's going to be beautiful. Everything's going to be fine." And sure enough, the next baby pops out, and she is a beautiful baby, cooing and humming like all good princesses should. The two girls grow up. One is wild, and one is the perfect princess. But their love for each other makes them inseparable. One night, after the girls have grown, there's a party at the castle. Whether the goblins and witches who have the party had some sort of contract with the king for an annual party, or whether this was a once-time event, nobody knows. But here's what happened. Tatterhood takes her parents and her sister up to the tower room, and she locks them in, and she tells her parents, "You watch my sister. Don't let her out. I'm going to be riding around patrolling this thing, okay?" So, leaves her sister with her parents, but her sister gets curious, whether she wanted to find Tatterhood or she just wanted to see what was going on. She opens the door and sticks her head out. Bam! Goblins and witches pop her head off and pop the head of a donkey on. They put her head on the donkey and they disappear. Tatterhood rides back and she is furious. She tells her parents, "Didn't I say, don't let my sister out?" But whether she's furious with them or with herself, nobody really knows. But she takes the donkey-headed princess and she heads off on the fastest ship that the king and queen have, and she chases down the witches and goblins, and she finds them and beats them back with her spoon and her goat, takes the princess-headed donkey and switches it and sets everything to rights. Well, almost everything. Both the donkey and the princess have a scar across their neck, and nobody knows if the princess was ever able to speak again. But Princess and Tatterhood ride off on the boat to a faraway kingdom. And when they land, Tatterhood leaves her sister on the donkey in the cabin and goes out on her goat and rides around the deck, round and round and round. And then at noon, she brings her sister out, now riding the intact donkey. Up and down the deck she takes her, and then takes her back to the cabin. The sight is so strange that the people are all talking about it, and the news comes to the king, who sends either his brother or his son, no one is sure which, to go and see this strange sight. The brother or the son, whoever he is, watches and sees Tatterhood riding round and round on her goat, and then the beautiful, stunning princess coming out on the donkey. And he calls out to her and asks her what does she want, but she won't answer him. So he brings news back to the king about what he has seen, and the king finally comes himself, and he views this, and as soon as he sees the beautiful princess, he falls in love like that, and he shouts out to Tatterhood, "What will you give me? What can I give you to see your sister?" Tatterhood looks at the king and decides he might be worth talking to, and so she says, I don't know. How about him? And she looks at the king's son or his brother, whoever it is, and the king says, "Done." And they ride off the princess with the king, who is smitten, and the brother who is not so happy with Tatterhood. Tatterhood looks at her groom and realizes she's going to have to take things again into her own hands. And she says, hey, we should get to know each other. Why don't you ask me some questions, buddy? And he says, okay, why don't you ask me, why am I waving a spoon? He says, why are you waving a spoon? She says, is it a spoon? And it's not. It's a beautiful fan. She says, why don't you ask me why I'm riding a goat? Why are you riding a goat? Am I riding a goat? And instead, she's riding a beautiful dappled mare. But this brother, he's a little slow to pick up on things, and so she keeps prompting, why you ask me, why am I wearing these hideous clothes? Why are you wearing these hideous clothes? And she says, am I wearing hideous clothes? And she's dressed in a beautiful gown. And finally she says, because he's really not picking up on this, why don't you ask me, why am I so ugly? With a little interest, he leans over and says, why are you so ugly? And she says, am I ugly? And he is staring at the most beautiful woman he has ever seen. And now he's riding off happy to this wedding with this beautiful woman for his bride. And they went off and ruled kingdoms and lived happily ever after. Now, that story, could it be the cure or the balance for the Disney princess? The princess who, instead of having magical helpers, keeps her magic inside of herself. Who chooses her groom, fights for what she wants, fights for the women in her life, as well as the men. For your week 3 activity 2 discussion board, what do you think Tatterhood would look like? How do her relationships compare with the relationships of, say, typical Disney princesses? Not the reimagined ones. I mean the 1950s, 1960s, 70s Disney princesses. So think about her relationships with women, with her mother, with her sister. Is she at odds with them the way, say, Snow White and Cinderella, Rapunzel are? Is she indifferent to them? Does she help and protect them even when they mess up? What are her relationships with men? Is she a passive recipient of their attention? Is she active? Does she choose who she wants to be with? And how does she build relationships? So the fairy tale is, by definition, a relatively flat genre. Characters are defined with one word. Colors are green or red or blue. They're not aqua or teal or hazel. It's a relatively flat, relatively monochromatic world. So that conversation, that question game that Tatterhood has at the end of her story with her groom, is that symbolic of something more? Could it be engaging with someone, getting them to get to know you? Or is it simply that typical fairy tale happy ending because she has to be beautiful at the end to be loved? And finally, how would you film Tatterhood? Would it look anything like the Disney Flight of Princesses, or would it be something different? Answer these questions and respond to one of your peers' posts. You don't have to respond to everything. Let's get a conversation going about this fairy tale that is so different from the canon that we have received. And it's even different than the other stories we're reading, because while these stories are writing back to the fairy tale tradition, Tatterhood is a traditional tale. It's one of those that was written a long time ago, but just never received attention. What do we do with this? I look forward to hearing your answers.